Hey, deserving listeners, Vanderpump Rules. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Keep in mind that everything I say is completely speculative based on very little information that's given to us. Let's watch.
At how drunk I got that night. And my personality did shift this summer. Like, there was a change in my mindset that I started not pleasing every single person around me, and I started only pleasing myself.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, okay. That fits with my hypothesis about her, that she's lived a lifetime of trying to please the two pleasers there, Swartz and Raquel. Different styles, though, I think. I think Raquel is more of, I will make myself invisible to please, and Swartz is more, I will make sure everyone's happy, sort of a pleaser. And we're hearing about more alcohol abuse and binging and problems with alcohol. So there's that. And I wonder if, because they all have histories of problems with alcohol or are engaged in problems with alcohol, that they might not fully appreciate how the alcohol might have played a role in Raquel's behavior in the moment. But I think from Raquel, what she's saying is that she turned a new leaf last summer in that she's like, I'm not going to please people anymore. Okay, so I don't know if this is what happened, but it sounds like it might be that there are three phases to emerging out of being a people pleaser or a doormat or invisible. And there are a lot of different domains that this fits with. And this is my model. This is something that I learned by working with a lot of clients. So if you have the first phase, which is that you have the problem of being a pleaser and invisibilizing yourself, I don't know if that's true. Let me know in the comments if that makes any sense regarding what you've observed in Raquel. And then the third phase that you're trying to get to is true assertiveness, where you are able to be in the room, but you're not imposing on other people, right? You are able to assert yourself, but you don't bulldoze others, and you have empathy. You care. You're considerate of you consider what other people are going through as you're asserting yourself. Sometimes you consider everything and you still assert yourself, even if it's against what other people want. Other times you might have an impulse to assert yourself, but you evaluate the situation. Well, I don't know if it's fair in this situation, or maybe I'll differentiate right now and think about it later. So that's the phase we're trying to get to, where you take up space, but you're not imposing yourself, and you're considerate of others. Now, the middle phase, in between being a doormat and invisibilizing yourself and being a pleaser, between that and being assertive, is often a problematic phase, but it's better than the first phase, but it often isn't perceived as better, and it's a progression to the third phase. So if you, your entire life, have not been able to be assertive or take up space or to stop pleasing others, then your first foray into not pleasing others, particularly if you're not in therapy, but even if you are, and this is something that I work with my clients, is that you're going to be bad at it at first, and you're going to go too far. So it's possible that for Raquel, and I'm basing this on very little information, I could be completely off, but using it as a jumping off point for yourself, is that the way the second phase will look, and it's a progression, we're going in the right direction, is the person will seem like they're acting out of character. Their person will feel very uncomfortable in this space. They're very comfortable in the pleasing space, and they're very uncomfortable in the taking up room space. They might need to drink a lot in order to get over the fear. She might have had the motivation, okay, I'm going to go on this trip and I'm not going to be a pleaser. And then she's like, oh, I'm finding myself being a pleaser. Well, what if I drink, and that'll give me the courage to be assertive? And then when the emerging taking up space and being assertive and speaking one's mind, and you know what, I'm not going to be a pleaser. Normally I have an impulse to constantly compliment everyone and support everyone, and I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to assert myself and whatever. And it's one-sided because they're in a state of distress as they are asserting themselves. It's just like all they can think about. It's sort of like if you were to dive off the top diving board at the pool, and it's 30 feet in the air, and you're terrified of heights. Well, in that moment, if someone, as you're climbing up the ladder and you're just like, oh my God, and someone comes up to you and says like, hey, how do I look in this bathing suit? You probably aren't going to have the mental capacity to stop and think, and to think how you respond, right? You're just going to be like, get out of my fucking face, I'm about to dive off this board. And that's what it's like, right? They're stepping into a very uncomfortable place. There's trauma triggers that'll happen from there. They usually will become a pleaser because of the traumas that they've been through. It's very scary. It's unknown. And you could argue that it's a phase that kids go through when they're young, and you expect them to go to, the terrible twos, the terrible fours, 7-year-olds who are asserting themselves. When they're that age and they're allowed to do that, then they go through those phases where they are over the top with their assertiveness. Like a version of this, this is a sliver of the overall behavior in children, is they might learn, you know what? I can take up space, and one of the ways that I deserve to take up space, and I'm, getting to know my competence and my place and my rights in the world, is that I get to tell stories and I get to say things sometimes. Okay. And when you're 3 years old or 4 years old, or maybe even as old as 5th grade or something, and you suddenly discover this, you're highly focused on it and you dominate the conversation. If you've ever been in a conversation with a child when they're like this, and not every child does, but I would venture to say all children have a phase of this to some extent. And they'll just yammer at you, kind of the way I am right now. And they will just talk and talk and talk and talk, and they're not concerned about how you feel about it, and you'll be bored out of your mind. And that's a phase that they go through. But if you were never allowed to go through that phase, then you never graduate from that phase, right? So you might enter that phase when you're 28 years old, or however old she was during that trip. And you're holding on for dear life. You don't know what it's like to take up space, and you're trying. And here's the problem. Because of the pitfalls of going into phase 2 without support and without self-awareness, there will be problems. And inevitably what will happen almost all the time is people will go like, phase 2 sucks, I'm going back to phase 1, and they never emerge out of phase 1 ever again for the rest of their life. What I do with clients is say, phase 2 has its problems, but you have to stay in phase 2 for as long as you can. And everyone around you has to be told, let's bring them into therapy, or sometimes they're right there in the therapy office because it's couple or family therapy. Or I'll tell the client, you got to go tell everyone, look, I'm in phase 2 and I'm sorry for this phase, but, and other people aren't going to like it because you're not the normal Raquel. They like the normal Raquel because they bonded with the normal Raquel. The normal pleaser Raquel was comfortable to them, was non-threatening. Now you're starting to say stuff and the system will react against that. And so unless you know what you're doing, you'll just go back to phase 1. So I don't know. That's just one hypothesis among many that helps me to frame what's happening here.
Not pleasing every single person around me, and I started only pleasing
Screwing
myself
people over.
And him.
Instead,
You started pleasing my man.
I have been.
Yeah, so Lala and Ariana are saying, oh, so instead of pleasing everyone, now you're having sex with Tom. You're being a bad person. And yeah, it's possible that that was part of phase 2. It's not what you should be doing in phase 2 of developing your voice and assertiveness. And remember that assertive, in my world anyway, does not mean bulldozing. Assertive means that you are asserting yourself while considering other people's feelings. It's a balance, right? Truly assertive people are empathetic while they're empathetic to everyone. They're empathetic to the person that they're with, and they're empathetic to themselves. They consider their feelings and everyone else's feelings. And if they don't know other people's feelings, they'll ask, so they understand that there's a balance there. And sometimes their feelings are going to, supersede someone else's, and sometimes the reverse. And you just have to figure that out and talk it out. That's what assertiveness means. Anyway, so is it possible that Raquel has a similar condition that I've been hypothesizing for Tom, that as she was emerging into phase 2, she's like, yes, I'm going to take back my life and I deserve this and I have all this anger and I want to express it, but I don't know how. So I will express it by cheating with Tom as a way of getting back at the world for, it's possible, but it doesn't seem that way to me. What I imagine is that for Raquel, she might have been thinking, well, she might have literally started the affair with Tom from phase 1, that she was just trying to please him, that Tom initiated things with her and she just never stopped to think, what do I want with this? I mean, she looked that way. In the final season of the final episode of the season, Tom was like, okay, he seemed to be saying, okay, we're done with it. It's come out. Ariana and I are done. Now we can be together. He seemed to be reaching for her. And Ariana was just like, I don't know what's happening. So we could imagine that the phase 1-ness was the beginning of the affair. So if that's true, I could imagine her going through a lot of anxiety because there's a lot of displeasing that she is doing here, right? By pleasing Tom, she has created a lot of displeasure among everyone else. So I wonder how she's doing. And maybe that's why she was panicking and had the restraining order, right? Because in the moment, it just gave her this boundary so that she could avoid having to face any of it. But I think because of the show and the contract and everything else, she's being forced to face it now. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that Raquel's behavior is excusable. It's not. She lied by omission. Tom, I think, culturally and maybe in my mind as well, is more to blame morally. But Raquel made thousands of choices to lie, to cheat at any point. Particularly after that first drunken get-together, that the two of them had. At any point, Raquel could have refrained from engaging and continuing the relationship, could have broken up with Tom, could have said, look, you either break up with Ariana or we're done. And until you break up with Ariana, or could have gone to others, Ariana, and said, I'm sorry that there were so many opportunities for that. And there's not much in the way that we could excuse that.
I have been super, super selfish. And Ariana...
Selfish does not fucking cover it, bitch. Diabolical, demented, disgusting, subhuman. Mm-hmm. Start getting a better vocabulary to
from the beginning, I've understood Ariana's anger, and I guess by extension, the other cast members that are trying to support her. Andy pointed out that everyone in the room, aside from Vanderpump, Mrs. Vanderpump, is it Lisa Vanderpump, has cheated in the past. So for everyone to be judging Tom and Raquel when they've done it themselves. So, and maybe Ariana hadn't either in terms of the show. So, I get that, but I don't know. I don't think that means that people aren't allowed to be hurt and angry. I think that what it means is that maybe there's a lot of repair, that everyone deserves to be hurt and angry, and to express that and have that validated, particularly by those who committed the transgressions. Just because you cheated in the past, it's like, then you don't deserve to talk about your hurt. It's like everyone deserves to talk about their hurt. So again, I totally understand that Ariana is angry. I think that there's a line though, right? And there seemed to be some dehumanizing language entering into the narrative here. With Tom, it seemed like he was almost kind of deserving it because he's refusing to emote. He's refusing to acknowledge the and his language is very careful on the reunion. I'm pretty sure he still believes that he is not to blame at all, and that the affair was this natural progression of their relationship, and that is not true. The natural progression of the relationship between Ariana and Tom might have meant that they were going to break up. He could claim, look, if, say, Tom never cheated and broke up with Ariana, he'd be like, look, we've been growing distant, all those things that he says. You're like, okay, all's fair in love and war, as they say. And I think that's under that category, right? It's like sometimes you fall out of love and you can have your narrative about it, but sometimes it just happens. Maybe Tom didn't work hard enough for the relationship, but working hard in a relationship requires that you have motivation, requires that you want to work on the relationship, and sometimes you don't, and sometimes that's an indication that the relationship has run its course. So if he had just broken up with her, then that's one thing, but to cheat on her, that's a whole other thing. Whereas Raquel, I think she's exhibiting that she's sorry, that I think she seems genuine in her sorrow, in her remorse, right? And I get that Ariana is angry for sure. And given Ariana's state, and apparently they're there for 10 hours, I can't imagine the emotional toll that doing this all day long would have on someone, particularly in Ariana's shoes, the humiliation, the pain. I mean, imagine for yourself, if you've been in Ariana's shoes, which I know a lot of you have, because you've commented and told me, and on average, I'm guessing a lot of you had, where you were cheated on and dumped and suddenly found out. Imagine having to do this. It would just be very hard. This might literally be one of, if not the most emotionally tumultuous times of Ariana's life, past, future, present. That'll take a toll on your energy level, on your attitude, on your perspective. So, and I get that. And she totally deserves to be angry. Baseline, bottom line, period. Having said that, like I said, I think that there's some dehumanizing language. She can certainly say to Raquel, you betrayed me, I'm angry at you, I think you're a terrible person, or I think there's something wrong with you, or I think you're lying right now about remorse. I don't believe you. But I think things beyond that threshold, which I'm beginning to hear, is understandable, but should be framed in the way that I'm framing it. That it's like Ariana's angry, and maybe a year from now, she'll say, well, okay, half the things I was saying to Raquel in this moment I stand by, but the other half, I think I was probably taking too far.
Fucking cover it, bitch. Diabolical, demented, disgusting, subhuman. Start getting a better vocabulary to describe your fucking actions. Because
Actually,
selfish does not fucking cover it.
I feel like my actions are human. It's
Not
exactly
at
that.
all.
No,
No.
can I tell you?
No.
That's not human behavior.
Not at all.
Have you watched
Not
the
even-
episodes?
Hey,
You
guys.
lying.
They're debating if it's human or not. I think what Ariana and friends are getting at is that it's not normal, it's not empathetic behavior, it's not mature behavior, or I don't know, well thought. It's not okay behavior. And okay, but I think what Raquel is saying is, I didn't wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I'm going to purposely ruin people's lives the way that you're saying that I am. And I don't know if we were always like this in our culture, but we certainly are now, where, and people will comment below sometimes and be like, I thought Tom was a narcissist or something. And I'm pretty sure what people mean is psychopath. And I'm pretty sure what they mean by that is that they're basically like a serial killer, that kind of personality. Those people exist, whether they're a serial killer or not. Psychopaths do exist. They're extremely rare. But this simplistic notion that everyone who commits these kinds of transgressions completely lacks empathy and is malicious, like they wake up in the morning and, because there are people like that, con artists. They're rare, like I said, but they exist. By rare, I'm talking about on the order of maybe 1%, maybe 2%, and you might literally never meet a person like this in your life. So of all the people that commit these kinds of transgressions, very few of them would be deemed a psychopath or antisocial or a narcissist, as the internet will say. And I think that that's how they're labeling them. And I wish that people had a wider variety of options available. It's just like you're either or. And I wish that people just saw it. They're just like, well, what you did was wrong and horrific and terrible, and you're responsible for that. And you made thousands of choices that were bad, but I don't know why you did it. I just know that you did, and I have a hard time believing there's a justification for it. So, just stick to that. But to label people as inherently, and I think it's actually harmful to the transgressed upon for Ariana, and I get the anger. Like I said, if I were her therapist, I would just validate the anger, and I would make note of future conversations that might benefit Ariana. Say in 6 months, I talk with Ariana and be like, so what's your narrative of what, how do you story what happened to you, and how do you story Tom and Raquel's personalities? And if I heard along the lines of what I've been saying, I would propose something, it's subtle and it depends on where Ariana was at. But what I would be thinking anyway is that Ariana might benefit from exploring other options regarding the narrative. Like one might be, and I would never suggest this to someone because everyone can narrativize their life as however they want. And I certainly don't know the best way to narrativize, but I do know that flexibility on narrative is actually really helpful to people to be like, okay, I feel like this is narrative, but I feel like there might be another one. Which one fits the best? Which one seems accurate? Which one is healthiest for me? Another one that might be healthier for Ariana would be that Tom, particularly Tom, but Raquel as well, have problems in their personality, things that are not my responsibility, Ariana. Ariana, I'm not responsible for Tom's traumas and his personality problems. I even tried to help him with it, and he didn't change it. Raquel, I think, has issues, doesn't excuse it. They're grown adults. They obviously could have made different choices, but I think that what they did was based on selfishness and lack of awareness and their childhood traumas. It doesn't mean that they didn't harm me, but it does give me somewhat of a story other than this tempting narrative that they're malicious serial killer psychopaths, that are trying to they literally prey on other people. So, and the reason why that narrative might be healthier is because, for one, Ariana can look back and say, one of my very good friends and my partner, someone I was in love with for 9 years, I wasn't wrong to involve myself with them. Because if they're malicious psychopaths, then I shouldn't have involved myself with them. I should have seen the signs or something like that. And so it can really harm the self-esteem and can make you not trust anyone. Because if you think half of the world are narcissistic, malignant, psychopaths, then that's an inaccurate, scary worldview. Another thing is that you will never trust another human being again. If you have a narrative that is potentially wrong, that Tom and Raquel are con artist psychopaths and malicious, then there were no real noticeable signs prior to realizing the infidelity, then anyone can be that. And that will ruin one's ability to trust others and ruin your ability to get needs met. And people with those narratives, they'll just become a hermit, right? Because that's the only answer. So that's not healthy either. But again, in this current state, I understand where Ariana is coming from.
To Ariana's face.
It's easy for you to say
Asking
that.
her,
You
like,
gotta be quiet.
It's
No, I don't
literally-
have to be quiet.
right now.
Literally-
Yes, you do. Because what's
Yeah,
sick
shut
about
up,
this? Let's
Tom.
talk about this.
No.
Shut up. I'm
Tom.
talking now.
Shut
up.
I'm going to
Shut
talk
the
now.
fuck
No,
up,
you've been
Tom.
talking.
Shut up. And I'm
You've
going to
been
continue
talking.
to talk. Shut the You're not fuck gonna up. defend.
I will say there's been a lot of this also that I wasn't reacting to. Just a lot of yelling at each other. And, it's performative because they know they're being filmed with 10 cameras. But I also think it's kind of real. This is a real thing that's happening. And I think that this is perhaps a little manufactured or pushed into existence, but I think these are real thoughts and feelings that these individuals have.
No,
Shut
you've
up.
been talking.
And I'm going to
defend this.
continue to
You
keep
shut the
talking.
fuck up,
Shut the
Lala.
fuck
I would
up.
love to hear what both of you have to say.
I'm going to go first.
Okay, what would you like to
Ladies
say?
first.
To watch the
And this is why family therapists, couple and family therapy, when I first decided to become a therapist, I didn't know about couple and family therapy. And I went to Antioch University, Seattle to an open house, an information meeting. And I thought I was just going to be a one-on-one counselor like I'd seen in the movies and like I'd had in my own life prior to that. But then Paul David, my eventual mentor, gave a talk briefly about another program that was called the Couple and Family Therapy Program, in which you are trained to work with couples and marriages and families and individuals. Couple and family therapists mostly work with individuals because that's who mostly come into therapy, but you have an additional training in couple and family therapy and systems and relationships and all that kind of stuff. In the moment, I thought, ooh, that sounds kind of interesting. The variety. I like to have variety in my life. I don't like to be in a rut, and I also don't like to be pigeonholed. So I thought, not only individuals like I originally thought, but couples and families as well. And, I was like, sign me up for that. And so I did. And then later I went back to graduate school and got another master's and doctorate in psychology to be trained as a psychologist. But anyway, the point is that I became a professor in the program directly after graduation at the age of 26, and I was terrified. My mentor basically convinced me, harangued me to be a professor. I was just like, most of the students are older than me, if not all of them. Some of them 20 years older than me. Why would they listen to me? I don't know anything. And Paul, my mentor, was like, you can do it. You can do it. You can do it. I believe in you. I believe in you. You're smart. You can do this. And I'm like, no, I'm not. It took me years. You could argue 15 years to be convinced that I was okay as a professor. So anyway, I was a professor, and as a part of the job, I would go to those information meetings and would talk to prospective students. I was on the other side of the room for many years, 25 years. And one of the things that I would notice is that when I would give that speech that my mentor would give, because a lot of people come to the university knowing they want to work with individuals and they might not know about couple and family therapy. So we were tasked with, to preserve our jobs and our salaries, we were tasked with trying to convince people to actually come into couple and family. Over time, people would actually come to the university seeking marriage and family therapy, but years and years ago, that was not the case so much. Anyway, so I would say a similar thing of just like, not only do you work with individuals, but also couples and families. And one of the things that I would see among the prospective students was there were two kinds of students. And sometimes I would literally say this, that, so I might say something like, okay, and usually there's, say there's like 60 to 100 prospective students in the meeting hall. And I would say, okay, so there's this thing called couple and family therapy. And in the program, we train you on systems theory and other kinds of family therapy theories and individual theories as well. So you have a wide variety of clients, individuals, couples, families, groups, kids, teenagers, adults. You're trained for everybody. And right now, so right now, I want you to check in with yourself, prospective students, and answer the question internally, does that sound enticing? Because it's more chaotic. Working with couples and families is more chaotic. There's a lot more conflict in the room. It gets kind of hard, but the time passes a lot faster. It's a lot more dynamic and interesting. And so for everyone in the room right now, check in with yourself. Does that entice you? Does that chaos invite you? Does that sound exciting to you? Or does that absolutely terrify you and you're thinking, absolutely not, I do not want to work with couples and families? Which one is it, or where are you on that spectrum? And what I would find is that there would be a lot of chuckling among the prospective students because they'd be like, oh, wow, you can see me. Yes, I am one of those people that, although it does sound scary, it sounds exhilarating. I get energized thinking about working with couples and families and groups and multiple people in a room. It's terrifying, but it sounds, that's the way I felt. And then there's another group of people that's like, oh my God, you see me. Yeah, that sounds absolutely horrific. There's no way I would want to do that. So, and I could hypothesize as to the background of these individuals. I came from a large family. Not only do I have 3 siblings, but I also have a lot of cousins and aunts and uncles. And my house was also kind of a neighborhood hangout place. The door was always open. We literally never locked the door to our house. I never had a key to the house. When we would leave out of town, we wouldn't lock the house. This is in Sammamish, Washington, if you're interested in the community. And back then it was kind of rural. But anyway, point is that you could say I came from a background. My mom had a daycare in my house. So I just grew up with a lot of humans. And our house was small. Our house was small. And we had 4 kids, 2 parents, and 15 4-year-olds and a worker in this fairly tiny house. Anyway, so I was used to chaos. I was used to loudness. I was used to interacting. I was used to not really having my privacy. I feel like the older I get, I'm a lot different than that. But anyway, so when I see this, I think, let me at it. Whereas some of you might be watching this, because this is what family therapy and couple therapy can be like, where, it triggers a lot of people and people start going off. And as a therapist, there's various different approaches and decisions that we will make treatment-wise when people start screaming at each other in session. Obviously, we don't want abuse to happen, and we might lay some ground rules for that. But sometimes it's good to get things out in the open. Sometimes it's good to just have people have a back and forth, and at the very least, you get to assess things, right? You get to observe what are the alliances, because I don't know if they sat them in this configuration. They probably did, because you have Tom and Swartz and Raquel. They're probably at the very least kind of on a team, right? And then you have the others that are on a different team. And so you observe that. You observe who speaks up for who in what way. I've observed that Ala or Lala and James are fighters. There's been even talk about, in general, they can be over the top with their anger over the years. So what's going on there with them? And then the other person, which I'm forgetting their name, seems more reasonable, a little bit more differentiated in their statements. So anyway, I just thought I'd yammer about that for a second. So for you, if you're a clinician or not, what happens for you as you watch them scream at each other? Because for me, I just think, people are having feelings, and if I were there, and that's one of the techniques, and that's a style, and not every family therapist does this, but for me, I try to accept and love and allow people to be themselves, because I want therapy to be a open, safe, expressive place, because I don't want to shut things down, because when I shut things down, then it's really hard to get any kind of therapy done. So what I would do is I would just wait for a pause, and I would say so I'm observing and I'm learning a lot, and I'm taking notes here, and I'm also observing there's a lot of pain, and I'm feeling it, something like that, so that I could provide some leadership, I could provide some emotional holding, I could demonstrate that I'm not going to flip out You know, I'm not going to run away or judge them or overpower them. You know, one of the worst things a family therapist can do in a situation like this is to try to dominate and say like, no, you got, stop it, to try to play the policeman. And the group will turn on you sometimes, which then it's really hard to recover from that position, right? So, it's like, I think Lisa Vanderpump, she's kind of one of those figures. Well, she'll kind of step in, but she's not dominant, at least in this reunion part. So she provides this kind of maternal figure where she cares, but she's not going to become the enemy. Anyway. All right. Well, that does it for that episode. If you didn't know, we're having our 15th anniversary live stream on September 16 and 17, I believe, in 2023. And you can join us there. We'll have 15 hours of live streaming that weekend, me and Humberto. And we do a lot of fun things and have some Q&A, and you can win prizes. And also, if you want to send in postcards or letters or packages or fan art, you can go to the website. There's an address there, I think, on the front page, and you can send it there. And everyone, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.